something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations. This is the Readman Truth to Power Hour with Jesse Turner and David Cruz today. You're live on WNHH 103.FM. And I'd also like to say I think we're off for a couple of days next week for the holidays. So I'd like to say happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, happy Christmas, happy everything in the world. And I wish everyone a wonderful holiday and New Year. And today I'm going to allow our guest to introduce himself. Disclaimer, I have known him since he was a little baby, okay? Or maybe middle school. I'm not certain. But all right, David, can you introduce yourself?
Well, I'll let you date yourself. I'm a young man. I'm David Cruz. I am the host of two podcasts called Hold That Thought and Press Core. CORE, because we're hardcore. That is a insiders journalist panel show where we cover the issues surrounding state government and the state itself. And the other show, Hold That Thought, is a chat show, not too much unlike this one, but it's also Jersey focused. I spent a lot of years, the last 14 years at New Jersey Public Broadcasting, maybe 10 years before that at WBGO. I was the newsman at the only jazz radio station in the New York metropolitan area. And then another decade before that as the editor-in-chief of a weekly newspaper called The Hudson Reporter, which covered Jersey City, Hoboken, and the rest of Hudson County.
Excellent.
That's the 60-second resume.
60-second resume. Now, can you share with us your passion? Passion for news, passion for journalism.
Well, it's tough because being a journalist is not, in my mind, journalists are not made, journalists are born. And I always tell young reporters that you either are this thing or you're not this thing. A lot of people get into broadcast journalism, particularly to be on TV or to be on the radio. Those are just venues to me. I mean, without sounding too, highfalutin, I have a passion for truth, a passion for justice, as a journalist and as an individual. But my job has always been contextualizing more than anything. It's a fine point, but I always worked I never really worked for a breaking news or a daily news operation. So I always had the great pleasure and convenience and luck of just having to contextualize the stories and not concentrate too much on the who, the what, the where, etc. And that's just been sheer luck on my part. There's a lot of people who, we call it filling the news hole, which is an everyday occurrence for people in this business. And sometimes you can't do all the things that you want to do with a story when you're just trying to fill the news hole. So I've been lucky to not have to really do that for my whole career for the most part. So I consider myself a contextualizer. And I think that that's an important part of journalism that's really being lost. I mean, the whole concept of what a journalist is, evolving and not in a good way. But I mean, I've always, I think, in my heart been a journalist. I don't know if you ever had the great pleasure, Jess, when I was much younger, I used to read the newspaper at the kitchen table to my mom and dad and whoever happened to be at the dining room table at that time. But that was my first job in broadcast journalism, was reading the daily newspaper to my family at the dining room table. And that's really how it began. And I've been, jumping around ever since.
Excellent. And we're in this time, and we're going to get into this later, but it may be that a free press and journalism, one of the key foundations for democracy, is under threat. And I'm wondering what new. I followed you since you were a kid, so you took I think you were the editor of the high school newspaper.
Yeah.
You were reading the news on the college radio station over there, and you were, and I remember you told us you were majoring, I think in broadcasting,
It's
and
called,
all of us were like, what's that? What's
yeah.
that? But
Well,
you were trained. When I think about this, and this is what I'm hoping the public understands, there are journalists of integrity, like, uh, and it's hard to be objective when you're telling a news story. And I'm not certain they're learning that anymore. Maybe we're learning, like sort of, like in Hamilton, say less and smile more kind of journalism. But could you tell us a little bit about uh, preparation for a journalist, the way you came up? Because you were different, David.
yeah,
I
I
don't know.
mean,
Oh, sorry. Let me do one more thing. If you ask David who he voted for, he can say, "I don't vote." Not that he doesn't value the vote, but he doesn't vote. You ask him what party affiliation he is, he's not going to tell you. And so tell us about the preparation of journalism in the past, and maybe we'll talk about what we think it looks like now.
well, I like to brag about the fact that I never took a journalism course ever. Not a one. Um, but I mean, the whole concept of what a journalist is changing right now, because the standards are just so diminished and have been redefined. But I mean, that's a conversation for maybe a little bit later in this hour. But your question was what exactly again?
What was your
Oh, yes, the
preparation
prep.
like?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah.
did whatever. You said you majored in broadcast, and we had
Yes,
no idea. The
right.
Jerry Springer show was like the
It
new
was,
show on TV. We thought maybe you were going to do, Jerry Springer or something.
yeah, no, it was the major was called media arts. Um, and my mom, and I know a lot of you used to say, what does that mean? And I didn't even know what it meant either because I didn't learn any journalism there. I learned some of the technical aspects of producing work. You mentioned that I don't vote. My producers say, don't tell anybody that. So thanks for letting that out of the bag. But I don't vote not because I think voting is wrong or stupid or useless. I don't vote because I really believe that a journalist should be invisible. And while you have personal feelings and things that you care about and that you're passionate about, I just don't feel like, for me, participating at the ballot box is what my role is. I think all of us should feel like we have a civic responsibility to our community. Some people vote, some people volunteer at food banks, some people are journalists. I think so long as we all consider ourselves to be contributing to society in some way, to our civic life, then I think, you find your way on how to do it. I've always felt like I was an invisible person, not that I wasn't a person of impact. I just felt like if I went to a news event, for instance, I tried to make myself invisible, just to be there, consume what was happening. And as I said earlier, I never had really strong daily deadlines. So I could always look at stories as thinking, how am I going to contextualize this? What does all of this that's happening now mean to Juan Q. Publico, who on the street couldn't give less of a crap about the machinations of the Jersey City City Council, but the Jersey City City Council was affecting their lives in a way that's very fundamental, from the direction of your street to what kind of buildings get built on your block. And when you talked about things that aren't being taught anymore, those were the fundamental things that, for me, I learned on the job, but you learn in journalism school about how government works. And we watch TV, a lot of folks watch, Fox or MSNBC or CNN, and their impression is that that is news. That's really kind of, if you took sports and cartoons and mashed them together, you would get political news. That's what's happening now. I think and they don't, the people who deliver, who are the talent on the Foxes and the MSNBCs, et cetera. A lot of what those people do is just be a talking head. That's a producer's game. Producers are the ones who read the book of the guest and come up with the questions for the anchor or the host to ask. So it doesn't take a lot other than an ability to read well, and to be pretty or handsome or good looking, to
We
be.
have.
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, that is where we are going. It's such a visual art, such a visual business now, that a lot of it has to do with how do you look. In today's day and age, I could never get hired to be a television news reporter. Although the last 14 years of my life, that's what I was. I was only able to do that because it was public television, and in theory, public television doesn't care about what you look like, but it's more about the content of your character. So I'm going to say that it was the content of my character that got me over the last, 30 years. Although, they tell me I have a great face for radio. So those of you who may be listening on WNHH, you don't want to turn on your YouTube now. Just want to keep the mystery of me being a handsome, tall, strapping guy in his mid 30s.
Yeah, we've got that, and we are also live on New Haven Radio.
Ah,
So
okay.
so live on the radio, they're not seeing us, so they don't know how good looking we are,
That's right.
how tall we are, and GQ stuff. We could be on the cover of Vogue or something. But so when I'm perplexed, I'm really afraid, David. So I'm an educator, lifelong educator, and I'm fearful for this democracy.
Yeah.
Fearful, and it's not only, it's before, like, you and I went to the same high school,
Yes.
ghetto high school, a ghetto high school in Jersey City, New Jersey, who would I'm sure that Arnie Duncan would have said was a failing high school. But yet at that school, we had a vibrant library, we had teachers. I took a high school class, sociology and psychology as electives. That was unheard of in 1974 in that school. And you had some influence. So before we get into all this stuff, I want to know, are there any particular teachers that inspired you to be a better writer, build a better character? I
Yeah.
don't know, make a better world.
Well, I think I had a few teachers in high school. I went to prep school for 2.5 years, and then I got asked to leave prep school in the
We're not
middle
talking
of
about that story.
in the middle of my junior year, and then went to Ferris High School. Shout out, which was, as you say, a ghetto public school. I would say ghetto adjacent, but yeah, I mean, there was a teacher whose name was Miss Brill, I believe. I mean, you may
Yes, I
remember
know
her.
Miss Brill.
She was an English teacher,
Yes.
who pointed out to me that I had a great affinity for words and how to put words together and how to use those words. So she was she challenged me a lot. And in college, I had a professor named Seymour Eichel, who was a creative writing teacher. Um, but he always encouraged me to have my own voice and to be who I am, regardless of what was expected, either in society or in the intro to creative writing class, to just be yourself. There was a person who influenced me a lot, I think, as a journalist. His name is Pablo Guzman. He was a multimedia journalist. He wrote for the Daily News, and he appeared on the radio at WBAI.
Oh,
Shout out to BAI in New York, um, and also was a TV journalist. But he was also, as I feel I am, not classically handsome in the sense of what we know of TV reporters now. He was a member of the Young Lords Party back in the 70s. They were kind of the Latino equivalent of the Black Panther Party,
yes.
based out of New York, but also had a Jersey City chapter, by the way. Jersey City is where I am right now. But he had a very personal style that showed a great level of being articulate and funny and not taking himself too seriously. And that's kind of how I go through my journalistic life is I take my work very seriously. I just don't take myself too seriously because there are people who have really hard jobs where they work, labor every day. And so, I get to pontificate on television. And so that's, compared to, you know, doing working for the DPW, my hands are
Department of
not
Public
quite as
Works.
yeah are not quite as rough as theirs would be. But I think the thing about journalism, and you talk about what's not being taught. I think in journalism schools, they're still teaching the basics and the fundamentals, which is good. Um, but I think there's less of an interest in the world of news or journalism in people who have those skills. It doesn't matter to a lot of news directors now if you don't know what the zoning board does or the planning board or all these other important commissions that affect your life right on your block. And when I was a newspaper editor, we used to have I used to make all my reporters write a weekly column called Parliamentary Procedures. And that was all about what happened this week at the Board of Ed, what happened at the Zoning Board, and all these boards and commissions that municipalities have that control your life and impact your life in a lot of ways. And so you don't get that now with journalists. The other thing, too, is that the technology now and the rise of social media, we were just talking about that, just coming from a taping of our press corps show. We were just talking about that today, how elected officials and so on, they don't need us anymore. The people who ran for governor in the state of New Jersey this year, and I don't think that this is a specific or unique to New Jersey, but what they do now is they hire influencers, and influencer is a whole other concept that is, insulting, but they hire influencers, and these are people who are professional promoters of whatever. So they'll have a TikTok or another type of social media platform where it's all about their personality and so on. And what we all do as consumers is we curate our social media so much that we only watch and see people who agree with us, by and large. But the folks who run for office in New Jersey and across the country, they hire influencers, and they do something like what we're doing now, a Zoom call, and they try to make it look like the influencer is a news person. It's a guy in a tie and he's in front of a microphone and he's tossing softball questions to whoever the candidate is. And you, as a consumer, and I should say that a lot of us as consumers, we consume by just letting stuff roll past us, roll right over us. We don't look at anything critically. So we see a guy in a suit in front of a microphone, he must be a journalist. But they're tossing softball questions that the candidate probably has had their PR people write for them, for this host of a show. And so they distribute that as if it's their candidate was on a news show. And most folks can't differentiate between the look of some contrived set from an influencer and from the set on MSNBC. So it's all the same, meaning they don't have to talk to us. They don't have to face us for questions. They can just go around us and make it look like they talk to the media all the time.
In in the when I arrived in Connecticut,
Yeah.
PBS in New York did a segment on a study called Merchants of Doom. And Merchants of Doom demonstrated that. And it focused on music and passion, not the press. And it said in the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, fashion people were chasing people down in the village and drawing what they were wearing, what they were buying, following the store, what were they listening to. And then, the focus, the Merchants of Doom focus was just what you're saying. They were saying, well, we don't have to do that. That's a waste of time. Let's tell them what they like. Let's tell them what they want. And then all of a sudden, music changed, art changed, fashion changed over there. And they called it Merchants of Doom because we could see over there. So we got this concept that, and not only that, people tell me, so I'm a blogger, and someone once told me I should buy bots. And I said, but what am I going to buy? And they said, bots. And I said, yeah, for $500 a month, you'll get 20,000 bots. For 1,000, you'll get 1,000, I don't know, 30,000 bots. And I'm like, what? What am I going to do? And I said, who are these bots? And they said, well, they're nobody. They're
Right.
nobody. So
Yeah.
so in an age of and I'm gonna it's funny. Let's give a shout out to the one thing maybe our president has. There's a lot of fake news out there. Maybe this the
Well,
bot news is.
well, it's literally fake news because not only is the information that you see only representing one side of a story, but increasingly now, the person giving you that news doesn't exist. Their creation of artificial intelligence. And so, I mean, if anything is a real threat to journalism, and I mean, this has already happened. We're already infected as a profession by this. Um, but for instance, the shows that I do, and thank you, by the way, for putting them up in the chat and links to both Hold That Thought and Press Corps. So I
That's
appreciate
right.
that. So the difference is most people, seniors particularly, who are still a core voting constituency for both parties, they see something online, Facebook. Seniors should stay off of Facebook, in my opinion, but that's a whole other story. But they see this stuff, and it is a totally artificially created individual bringing you this information, and it looks a lot in these early stages of AI. It still looks a lot. It can fool me. And I'm pretty discerning when it comes to that sort of thing, but it's invaded everything. There are news outlets here in New Jersey, and I'm sure across the country, that already rely on artificial intelligence for content on their websites. And everybody's going to be a website. Newspapers, I mean, I don't even know anybody who reads a newspaper. I can't remember the last time I even saw a newspaper, to be honest. And I love newspapering. I For me, that was the thing that influenced me so much, was being a newspaper man. Um, but I've accepted that newspapers don't exist. Um, but now that you're online, eventually, guys like me, we won't exist anymore, because what AI does is it scours the internet, right, in ways that you and I would never be able to do in 100 years. And then it takes all of that information and turns it into a news story. Now, the editors at the paper say portions of this story were created using regenerative blah, 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 with the oversight of our editors, which, if you consider that most of the editors now at newspapers are, 22-year-old kids with zero context, you can't imagine what's already passing for news. And now people know how to manipulate that. So what they do is they hire bots to make the story seem like it's this way, or that it's being received this way. And AI doesn't really care or know who's a bot and who's not a bot. Probably does know who's a bot and who's not a bot, but they don't discern between them. They amalgamate what's out there, and there's 60 references to this being a bad law. Then that's the narrative that the AI is going to pick up. And the people who manipulate information and the press and all of that, they know this. And so this is what is happening now. I'm sure I sound like a conspiracy theorist
Oh,
on an overnight show at some public radio station in small town Arkansas, but that's not a conspiracy theory. It's a business model, and so that's why, for me, I think it's important. Like, I won't go into the whole story, but I got fired from my job this year in October, and within 2 days, I had two podcasts up on YouTube. Most of everything, most information gathering, people are going to be getting it online. Most of us already do. So it didn't matter that I wasn't on the New Jersey public broadcaster anymore. I was online. And so it freed me to be who I am and to do stories and have interviews and guests that I, approve of and that I set a standard for. And people like me, not even me necessarily, but people like me who feel a responsibility to journalism and to truth and to context. This is where we're gonna live, out here if you look out, it looks like, a big abandoned field of full of cactus and tumbleweed. But that's what the future of what we do kind of looks like right now. And we are going to be people like me and journalists who have those standards. We're going to have to be out here struggling against a tide of artificial intelligence and people who pass as journalists who know not the first thing about being a journalist or what that means, getting accepted. We have a guy who, in this era, he does a blog, a podcast. And I always say, there's these guys who are sitting in their mommy's basements, doing a podcast. But his thing is to disparage everyone, right? All the other reporters and all the people who are on the opposite political spectrum of where he's coming from. But given an opportunity to be a journalist, the person drops the ball. For instance, he was at a demonstration, a pro-Palestine demonstration, and he was railing against the woke junk of these people, blah, blah, blah. And he's standing with the demonstrators walking past him, right? And he's saying, look at these clowns, these woke fools. But he doesn't turn around and engage any of them in conversation, ask them questions, even pointed contrary questions. That's the job of a journalist, not to stand there while people who are engaging in civic life are walking behind you, and all you're doing is mocking them, but you're not engaging with them. That guy is called a journalist, and he's had congressmen and candidates for mayor or whatever come on his show, and all he does when they come on is toss them softball questions, and he's very agreeable. When the guest is gone, then he goes into rants about everything. But that is what journalism is right now. Nobody, well, not nobody, but a lot of people don't differentiate between real journalism, what I do and what a lot of other people do, and the junk that is populating social media. So it's a real challenge. The the landscape for us is unclear. But if you feel anything for this profession or for the impact that it has on your community, then you have to be out there and try and fight the fight.
Fight the fight. And so, a little sidetrack in terms of AI is already in our public schools.
Yeah,
People aren't just reading real books. They're not reading real textbooks. They're using the Chromebooks. We used all that money from the Build Back America, so everyone got millions of Chromebooks, all connected to entities, private entities, giving them information.
yeah,
Sometimes the text is real. Sometimes, well, I would say the text is real, but it could be abbreviated
yeah,
almost. But one of the things I've noticed, because this has been going on for over 20 years now, so civics has been downplayed, history has been downplayed. We turned democracy into just the definition, no discussion in that. And now our children have been going through this. It's been getting more thumbed down over the 23 years to now, that when you ask college professors, I was a college professor, and you ask them, does anybody read in your class? A lot of them will say no. Then they ask, does anybody write in your class? They'll say no. I'm a literacy professor, so we talk about stamina. There's no stamina. So kids will read a page and they say, I'll be like, what? Did they have Mrs.
exhausted.
Stanfield? Man, what are you talking about? We read War and Peace. That was 1,245 pages. What's going on with you? But so it's what I'm saying is what's infecting our media was also infecting our schools, and nobody is at a time where we need not only a free press, not only we're going to talk about why we need public press, but there's no critical media literacy education going on in our schools.
Yeah.
So I want to bring us back because that just went on a rant off the side. Sorry, I'm still an educator,
Uh,
but we want to. I want to ask you this question because to me, in this world that you just described, there was one place I could go. So, and the one place I could go, and New Jersey had a pretty good public broadcasting network. So does New York. I'm saying Connecticut's not bad, but you two were the least bit. But I could watch real news, real stories, just like this. This is a public broadcasting piece. There's no commercials on this. I could listen to integrity and characters, and so now I want to come to when we cut federal funding to public broadcasting. Is this not a threat to our democracy?
I mean, our democracy is under threat, and part of it is because journalism is under threat, um, and part of that, and part of why we almost, and when I say we, I mean the general public, almost didn't recognize it, is because it's just a slippery slope. You have politicians and elected officials who dumb down their message to a dumbed down media, which is really very much concerned with the attention span of the reader, listener, viewer. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you feed people apple pie every day, they're going to want apple pie every day. You try and feed them some broccoli, they're going to say, like, what is this crap? You know? And so it is unfortunate, and I don't feel a great deal of optimism. I hope that you didn't bring me on to spread some optimism, but
You got
I
to bring
just
the joy.
yeah, it's it's very bleak because in our state, I'll just use an example of our state. We had a public television broadcaster. The state, in fact, requires by statute that there be a public broadcasting service that the state provide. So what happened in New Jersey was that WNET, which is the big New York flagship station of the PBS network, they took over the operation of what used to be called NJN, New Jersey Network, which was literally public television. The checks were signed by the governor. That's how public that television was. And so over the 15 years, technology has changed so much. The delivery systems have changed so much that it became difficult for the state to justify to voters who they've convinced that they can't afford anything that's not, roads and bridges and only hard stuff that you can feel. They say to the public, hey, we can't fund public television. There's plenty of television out there. And so in our case, for instance, we had, or the NJPBS had, $1 million budget. Out of a budget in the state of $58 billion, 1 million is what they contributed to the operation of public broadcasting. And then, so they cut that down to 250,000, which you might as well have given that operation nothing, because $250,000 doesn't even really pay for the bagels that you occasionally have for staff meetings. So coupled with that, federal cuts to public broadcasting and any public media service to the point of being zeroed out, those cuts were devastating to stations across the country, particularly in rural areas and urban areas where they need news the most. Those stations didn't get support. Now, you could say maybe that's part of the plan, right? Again, I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist guy, but it's a lot easier to control an uneducated mass of people than it is to control a mass of people who are critical thinkers with a healthy distrust for government. So it's hard. It's a challenge for us for sure. And really, I mean, the press is such a fundamental part of our system. It's in the First Amendment, number one. And so we have just, as consumers of news and media, we've just let it become so unimportant because we have so many channels, and it's a lot easier for us to just watch stuff that tells me and agrees with my conservative point of view or my progressive point of view. So I end up in a social media silo where not only do I not hear from somebody with opposing views, but I don't even look at what their opposing views might be. So you can't really have an argument with someone if you don't know where they're coming from, right? And so we just kind of throw up our hands and find the warmth of an agreeable community around us. We want to be able to say, oh man, that president sucks, or that governor's the greatest governor ever. And we don't want to challenge ourselves. We just want to consume media. It doesn't matter what it is, so long as it doesn't shock me, doesn't shock me into thinking. There's plenty out there to shock you visually, but there's not a lot out there that challenges you honestly. You can find any channel that will tell you whatever it is that they want to tell you and make it sound very convincing. So if you don't then go and try and find another outlet to either confirm those things or challenge those things, then you're not being responsible. But you can't ask people to challenge themselves, although we should all be challenging ourselves all the time.
I'm certain we should. And it's this idea now of creating news deserts in urban areas
Yeah.
and rural areas, just at the time where we need them most. And yes, no, it's increasingly and building a greater polarizing nation, a polarized nation these days. So we get that component. And I know you said, well, don't bring me on here for the hope, And you said that I'm gonna give you what I think is the hope. All right. So remember when the Iraq War broke out?
Yeah.
And we had news journalists embedded with soldiers in the battlefield. And if you looked at them, you saw they had a little handheld camera
Yeah.
and they had a laptop. And then world music came out. And I saw the same thing, world music. All of a sudden we were playing all our favorite songs were being mixed up with connecting to from Ghana to Brazil
Yeah.
to San Francisco, doing songs like Everyday People. And they were able to do that. The technology gave in the field reporters and musicians, I'll say musicians, gave them at their fingertips the abilities to create content that they would have never been able to do without being members of CBS, NBC. So and just the very fact you said 2 days after they let you go, you had, what was it, 2 podcasts up
Yeah.
in that point. So can we talk about this technology? Because I'm looking at
Yeah.
the liberation. Public Enemy said, don't believe the hype. I'm going to tell you, don't believe the hype. There's a way around this. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but we can produce meaningful, accurate, and fair content. So can you tell us about how the technology end of it? Because I'm assuming you don't have guys driving you around the state now, filming
No.
you, editing and stuff, but somehow you're pulling this off.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this about the technology. When I was studying media arts, the first camera that I used was a studio camera, and it was about the size of my refrigerator. And I have a full-size refrigerator here. That was what we had to roll around, and you couldn't pick that thing up. And now we just shot a cooking segment. We were talking about making
I saw
pasteles.
Dolly was on.
Yeah. And we shot it on 3 of these, right? And if I wanted to or needed to, I could also use this to edit the thing. I mean, I used my laptop, but I could use it to edit the thing. So, I mean, that's incredible power. Incredible power to me right now. I could go on and be live around the world. People in the deepest recesses of China, wherever there's internet, could find me and hear my stories, right? And on top of that, that means that, remember, when we were kids, there were 10 channels, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 at 7 channels, and maybe 1 or 2 en Espanol on the UHF band. Most kids don't even know what the UHF band is today. But so, all right, let's say it was on a good day, 10 stations that you could watch, right? Now, there's millions, literally millions of places where you can find content. Millions. And you would think that that's a positive thing. And yes, it is. It has potential, real possibilities for power. But the fact is that if we got 1 million outlets, 999,950 of them are giving you junk. Information that's one-sided, misinformation, disinformation, and then bar fights, booty shorts, car crashes, fires, people getting into fights at Walmart. This is the kind of stuff. And now since I'm kind of swimming in that ocean more directly, I've got to consume more of it to understand how it works and what gets views and so on. It's hard to compete if you're a news show like mine where you discuss state issues, right? Or you have people who are influenced, who are thought leaders talking about important issues. You try to do that. For every one of those, there's 1,000, hundreds of thousands of others that are showing you crap, and so that's the real challenge. Is we as consumers have to challenge ourselves. I'll go back to that, because Facebook, Meta, Instagram, they could not give less of a crap about you. You do not exist other than to be a part of what feeds their algorithms. So that's nameless, faceless. You're just a digit in the algorithm. And so you can't expect that Facebook is going to keep you away from inappropriate material for your kids or even for yourself. Facebook's not going to do it. Instagram, all the other platforms, they do not care about what goes on their platform. They just say, hey, it's our users who create the content. But they reward the most ignorant, the most divisive, the most bare breasted. That's what gets rewarded by the algorithms in social media. So you are fighting, I am fighting, people like me are fighting a real battle and trying to stay relevant in an ocean of sewer.
And a worthy battle, a battle that can save humanity, that can save a democracy, that can save a nation. So that's a worthy battle. So I put in the chat box Henry David uh, Thoreau's quote about a mass of men lead quiet lives to desperation. And people have heard that quote, but they haven't connected it to that's when, yes, he went to Walden's Pond. That was after they arrested him because he would not pay his local tax to support slavery or a war with Mexico. And they forget about that component. But everybody else was happy with that, mass desperation,
Yeah.
living quiet lives. So I think we have that component and this piece. And so I think there's a hope in the sense that we have fighters out there. We've heard of, Ulysses, of Hector, of Hercules, of all these, in Cuba, we had Jose Marti, and Jose Martin, 16 years old, writes, the White Rose poem. They send him to jail. They throw him in the salt mine jail, Somehow he gets sent to Spain and he comes back there. What I'm saying is, there is a new civil rights fight. And it's not just the normal civil rights. We all want to fight that. But I think this is a civil rights fight to protect, not only news, but civic responsibility, because that's what you're talking about, David.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's paying you a six-figure salary to run two things. You're probably sacrificing. You're probably selling the pasteles that
That we
Dolly
made.
made on the corner. Remember the neighborhood? We used to have the shopping carts, and the ladies used to sell the pasteles on Friday nights. So
That's right.
so that component over here. So I do see hope. It's when I retired, I took on the radio show over there, and it was really, I don't think I'm going to change the world at all. But I thought maybe if there's a truth out there, Baldwin said, you can't change the world, but literature changes it, even if it's a millimeter, because just being there. So I do think that people will hear that. They'll be turned off by. Does anybody really watching those Jerry Springer shows anymore, or whatever the realities? I think there's. I'm sure there's new trash stuff. But so if we thought, David, what could, and I'm going to bring you to the educator side. You're not an educator, but in some ways you are. What can we do? What can we do that James A. Ferris High School did that inspired kids to read? Because I was with high school teachers last night who told me nobody's reading. Read, think critically. What could schools do to help us get a, I don't know, a critical literacy? I'm not certain of the terminology, but
I
how can
mean,
schools help us?
I think you deserve a lot of credit for your optimism, um, because it takes a lot to find that. If I always say the more you think the less you really do know. But I think to find optimism today, that's a blessing. I think schools. I'll tell you what. I don't know that there's so much pressure on schools, right? To be bottom line oriented, and the technology has not shown any evidence that it's helping
Yeah.
helping people be smarter or learn more in schools. But the nonprofit world provides an opportunity. One of the things that I'm in the process of right now is starting a nonprofit with the goal of starting a community newspaper in conjunction with the colleges and universities in Hudson County, specifically in Jersey City. So we want to start a nonprofit news operation that is operated by students, but also community people who are not trained as journalists, but are civic minded. And so, if schools can partner with nonprofits that have an opportunity to create more outlets for responsible, responsive, relevant journalism, then that's how schools can help. Does it help to teach journalism? Not necessarily. It helps to teach civics. It helps to teach writing. It helps to teach critical thinking, because those are all the things that make a good journalist. You don't even have to write anymore, to be honest. You just have to communicate. The language that you use, the syntax, the grammar, all of that. Yes, those are important things. But the ability to communicate, the ability for you to tell a truth to someone else, or to bring context to what they think is their truth, that's an important thing to have. And so schools can help by turning out better citizens. And by citizens, I mean citizens of the world, not someone who has papers.
Not someone who has papers.
Yeah.
All right. So we do, there's much work to do.
Yeah.
And by optimism, um, optimism without building hope, meaningful hope, is useless. So, but we're doing it. We're trying to do nonprofits. We're doing the things that the public would have done before.
Yeah.
That we seem to have no time. So we're coming down to our final kind of minutes of the show, David. There's 2 minutes left.
2 minutes,
You could give
exactly.
us 2 minutes to give us, can I say, not optimism, but your best hopeful moment for the
Yeah,
future.
look, we just had our family Christmas party this past week.
I was there.
Yep, we had a dozen little kids running around, um, giving birth today, as we found out that another one of our family is with child now. That is an act of hope in and of itself, right? So I think that there's enough hope out there for people to want things to be better. But I don't know that the powers that be, whoever they are or whatever they are, want that to be the case. So it's up to us. We have to challenge ourselves to be more responsible consumers of information and more responsible distributors of information.
All right. This is 103 FM New Haven. This is your host, Jesse Turner with the fabulous David Cruz, bringing you the hope for a new, free, and better democracy. We can build it. We can make it better. Thank you, David. It was an honor to. This is a different conversation to have with my friend who was usually talking silly stuff. So, but thank you, thank you, thank you. I think the music should start, but if it isn't, there we go.
Cue the theme.
Cue
Good
the
to talk
theme.
to you. I appreciate you having me on,
Yeah.
brother.
I love you, brother.
Bye.
Give me some of them tamales.
Happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.